what's interesting, having assisted and working on operas, is to answer the question: why are we watching this particular story now? Why am I, as an audience member, watching this? How do I connect to this story? Why am I watching this piece that was written so long ago, when society was very different, maybe not as different as you think? So there's something interesting about finding an approach to the work. In this case, in this case, Joel, the director, came to me, and when he was asked to do this opera, and he already knew, for his reasons, that he wanted to set it in the circus. He came to me and said, "Do you want to do this? Do you want to work with me on this? I want to set it in a circus." And I was like, "Yes, I want to do the opera." "Why do you want to set it in a circus?" For me, it's not good enough to just say, "Yes, I'll put it in a circus," and just slap it in. I need to understand why. What is the journey of the people that we're watching? Why? And what's the dramaturgical reason, not just because it will look amazing. And so I was interested. So we dug and we did research, and we dug into who these characters were, did a lot of thinking about who these characters were, and it just seemed to make sense. The characters that Hoffmann talks about when he takes us back into his stories are really interesting characters. And so it started to make sense to set in the circus. The circus is music. The popular music of the circus was opera. Were songs from opera. That's what the bands played in opera. Were in the circus. It was funhouse mirrors, fantasy. People fall in love, and the weird and the wonderfuls, the exotic and the erotic. And so it just started to fit really nicely as we were sort of working through and seeing does it make sense. And then also the fact that the opera is called the Tales of Hoffmann, not the Tales of Olympia, the Tales of Juliet, the Tales of Antonia. So there was something interesting about that, and that for us was a keystone. For us, a through line for the opera was seeing Hoffmann's journey. Why is he, when we first see him, who he is? How did he become who he is? Why is he this sad poet? And so we sort of started to track the through, started to make sense that, so I'm just going to go right to how we were starting to approach it. When we first see Hoffmann, he is an older man, he's a bit disheveled, he's a drunk. And he happens to be a worker in a sort of like a roustabout. But he's great at telling stories. So everybody gets him to drink and gets him to tell the stories of his past loves. So he starts to tell the stories, and he takes us back in time. So when we go back, we go to Olympia, and he's a younger version of himself. We see a young, fresh man, and he's a worker at the circus. He's pushing Olympia's box into place, and then as we go through each story, the love doesn't work out for whatever reason, and he gets drunker. And then he goes and our muse, Nicholas, is his buddy, who is feeding that a little bit. He's like, "Sorry, bud, you know what? Have another drink." And it makes sense by the end. So then in Antonia, the same thing. So then again, it's another failed love. So he gets a little drunk. He's more disheveled. He's older. He's aging very quickly. Because when love, we talked about this, when love fails, you kind of age quite quickly, a lot in that moment, and you get a bit more broken down as a human being. And so by the time we get to Juliet, he's given up on love, but she lures him in. We'll give it one more try, and of course it doesn't work at all, and so that by the end we are back where we started. We see him as an older, drunken man, and we understand how he came to be. And that, for us, was an interesting overarching approach to the opera, to tell his story. And in the circus, the most beautiful and the saddest poets are the clowns. We don't turn him into the clowns, we don't have to worry about that. Don't turn him into a clown yet. But there was something interesting about that arc for him. And so, keep going. I can talk about more of the design. I don't want to give too much away because then you'll see it all and it'll be as interesting. So we set it in we never explicitly say this anywhere. I hope it doesn't say this anywhere in the program, but we set it in a sort of late 1920s, 30s Dust Bowl circus when we first see Hoffmann. When he takes us back in time, we go a little older, so now we're 1910, so now that's more reflected in the costumes. for the chorus and some of that. One wonderful thing about costumes for the circus is, though, for the circus performers that we have is, and the personalities that we see, is that you can go further with the costumes. You don't have to be so, they don't have to be, they hint at the period, of course, but you can go further because they are theatrical costumes still, so it allowed us to go a little further with different things. Yes, then we'll go back into time. So, yeah, I can just, it's a really tiny model, I don't know how to show everybody. But we're also replacing, one interesting thing about this is we're replacing the front cloth of the theater with a circus tent drop cloth, so that the minute you walk into the theater, we are where we are. And then that opens up and it reveals a world. What's set up now is sort of a hybrid of two different looks. You can come up afterwards and take a look, and I should have brought a PowerPoint to show. And so you can't really see, but we're between two tents, so we're sort of backstage of the circus. The very beginning, it's all the roustabouts and the circus performers on break, and they're drinking, and it's mealtime sort of break, and that's where they browse Hoffmann up to start to tell his stories. So instead of in a pub beside the opera, we are sort of backstage of the circus. Stella, instead of, she's still an opera diva in ours. The biggest stars of the opera were still opera singers and divas. They were the singers. They were still the sort of the star of the show. So we're still having that, and she's unattainable to him still as well, in particular why he goes into stories. And then when we go back in, we're in between the two tents and everybody's drinking and having a break. And then when we go back into time, our tents close. And we go inside Olympia's scene in the sideshow tent. So in this we have a three-legged man, we have half man, half lady, we have a lady who's just a torso on a table, we have a contortionist, we have a tattoo woman, we have a wolf boy. This one we were able to give them really specific characters, and it's kind of been quite a lot of fun because we wanted it a bit more colorful. Also, everything becomes more colorful when we go back in time. So we're doing the reverse of what sort of movies do. So it's actually more like, I guess, Wizard of Oz. We start off sort of a sepia tone and brown tones when we first see Hoffmann, but when he tells us the stories, that's when the fantasy starts to come out. It's his memory of his love. So there's a lot more color that comes out, there's a lot more personalities that come out. Yeah, so then we're inside the tent, and then of course Olympia, it sort of worked out perfectly that Olympia, as a new invention, as a new creation by Spallanzani, is part of the sideshow. So she is revealed on at the sideshow. And the spectators come and they pay money to see her. And then I'm not going to change because it takes too long to change everything. And then when we go into Antonia, we've made Crispell sort of the leader of the band, the circus band. So music, obviously, being a heavy influence. The fact that he is the leader of the band of the circus, but won't allow his daughter to sing. And so there's something quite nice about that. And Dr. Miracle makes appearances in all kinds of unexpected places in that scene. And then when we go into it's intermission, we have the barcarolle, and we have that back in front of our front cloth routine. And the entire cast is standing in front of this, and it's Giulietta and a couple of hooch girls luring people in, taking their money and luring them into the games. So in the opera, she sings games, and so we've made the games the adult tent, and so it opens up. They enter the tent, and instead of a carousel of horses, it's a carousel of women. So there's a little tiny, it's a little tiny carousel, and then there's a wall of mirrors, funhouse mirrors, that go behind it. And these are all doors that lead to other rooms where transactions happen between a man who buys one of these women. So there's something interesting about that the fact that Hoffmann has given up on love, but Giulietta manages to lure him in and steal his soul. And so there's something tragic about that. And he just gets sucked in. And And then when we go back, we end up back in the epilogue to where we began. And he's also rejected by Stella. And so it also comes full circle. I'm not going to give it away because there's some really interesting moments of that epilogue that don't happen in most productions. In terms of coming full circle, his journey and of his three loves, yeah, I don't want to give it away, so you have to come and see it to sort of get the whole thing. But I think it's really it's been an interesting challenge, and I find it always interesting because a lot of people who come to opera know the operas really well, and so to try to do something different with it is always. Is always interesting, but try to stay true to the story, and but also try to find a way that we now, as a modern audience, can relate to these stories and to these characters. So, it's really quick.